But let's introduce the panelist moderator. Robin began her coaching and leadership development practice after 25 years in business, where she was the CFO and the COO of both public companies and nonprofits. As an ICF professional certified coach, Robin helps leaders tackle tough challenges ranging from dysfunctional work environments and interpersonal conflict to fast-paced change. So, please welcome Robin to the stage. Woo!
You guys can hear me okay? Awesome. How about this conference? I was here last year when we did our proof of concept, and it was our first conference, and it was unbelievable. The energy was great. We all went home, and we just couldn't quit talking about it. And of course, my children, who are a millennial and a Gen Z, wanted me to quit talking about it, but I couldn't. And so after the conference last year, I called Jim Sugarman, our executive director, CEO of 4GenNow, and I said, I want to do something with you. And so I signed up to be on the advisory board. It has been an absolute delight. I have learned so much about working across generations. And in my field of work, having been in the C-suite, I thought, well, you know, I'll be working with people that I really relate to at my own age. And guess what I'm finding? I'm beginning to work with people who are younger and younger. They want a little bit of that elder wisdom when they call me and talk to me, but they also are teaching me. And I've coined a term which I call bi-directional mentoring. So when somebody calls me up and hires me to be a coach, I'm like, well, okay, but part of it is I need a little bi-directional mentoring from you as well. And I learned so much across the generations. So it is a pleasure today to be here to moderate this panel. We are going to have a really interesting group, and we are going to have some intergenerational conversations, and we're going to see some bi-directional mentoring and conversations going on here. We'll have some elder wisdom, we'll have some DQ, the digital intelligence, we'll have some EQ, and I gotta tell you, there's a heck of a lot of IQ up here when I get everybody out. So if my panelists could come on up, that would be fantastic. I see one coming up. And I saw David Evans in the back of the room a minute ago, Jim. Did we lose our man in a kilt? And I've got my intergenerational co-founders coming up as well. There he is. We found him. It's not hard to know who I'm talking about when I say man in a skirt. Okay, this is great. So we changed out our panel just a little bit. We had earlier a panel of intergenerational co-founders, if you were here to listen to them, Alan and Dylan, and they said, you know, we talked for a bit and we did moderation, so we said, okay, let's switch it up, because we are a fairly adaptable group here. Anyway, what I'd like to do is I would like to just say we're going to ask some questions that I have shared with folks. I'm going to do an introduction, I'm going to ask some questions, and then we're going to spend some time getting the audience involved to ask questions. So if there's anything you haven't gotten to ask earlier today, there's a lot of wisdom up here. We've got the intergenerational co-founders that we have here, and I'm going to let you all do the talking. I was going to do the introductions. I didn't bring my glasses up here, so here you go. All right, if we could start with you. So, John. Okay. There we are.
John, there we go. My name is John Christensen. I am board chair and principal investor for Pocket Change, the company that you see here. This is co-founder of mine, and we are intergenerational.
Yeah, my name is Christian Dooley. I gave the pitch a little earlier on Pocket Change, but it's been awesome working with JC. We have our other co-founder up over there, Rain. But yeah, I mean, we'll get into more of a full description. We've been at this for almost a little over a year and a half now. A lot of learning, a lot of failures, but a lot of exciting stuff coming really soon. So,
I think you've met me today a few times. I'm the Kilted Coach, the creator of Chaos, and I'm very lucky that I have 17 different clients in the States as part of RLC USA, who are actually all live, living and breathing, intergenerational case studies. So that when Jim rung me and said, hey, Dave, what do you know about these things? We need to meet real clients. We were able to give him countless case studies of this thing happening in America every single day.
I'm Lou Wilkes. I'm obviously representing Elder Knowledge. Just kidding. Yeah, that's right. No, have been doing, I did corporate America till about 17 years ago, and then decided to get a real job and went into venture capital, not an industry to pursue unless you are open to some degree of self-abuse and some fairly intense opportunities for interaction with all kinds of people. Robin had kind of asked me to maybe set the context for our company that I'm going to talk a little bit about, NCS Analytics. It's based here. I'm the executive chairman. It was founded by millennial CEO who was a reformed banker who decided he was going to tackle the banking challenges associated with the cannabis industry. Interesting set of problems related to things like the financial criminal enforcement network requirements, etc. And he built a set of algorithms and platforms that were going to help bankers be compliant so that they could actually take the duffel bags of cash off the streets and begin normalization of somewhat chaotic aspect of that industry. I was introduced, number one, because he needed money as a venture capital partner, but also my background in the last 15 years has been predominantly in the analytics space, focused on the intelligence sector and some of the other more traditional large data challenges in the world. We looked at what he was trying to do. It was a good fit. I should kind of note, we don't invest in companies that we're not involved with. So you have to, if we sign up, we're operationally involved in each company. So in this case, I agreed to partner with Adam, and we took on the challenge of this strange new industry out there. Long story short, we had to pivot our business model numerous times. We ended up being predominantly focused on audit, regulatory, and financial services sectors, but regulatory and audit became core mainstays to our business. The business exploded. Because of that, we amassed the largest compilation of data relative to what started out as cannabis, then went to alcohol, tobacco. Now we're in the opioid tracking segment of the marketplace as well. And we do compliance monitoring. We're also a quasi-government agency in 3 states. So we actually perform regulatory oversight relative to some of these cash-intensive industries. As a result, it's exploded, but as I'm sure we'll talk about, the biggest challenge here has been how to work together as a team, and that's a little about NCS.
Thank you, Lou, and thanks for sharing a little bit about how you got there. What I'd like to have John and or Christian talk about together, maybe tag team a little bit, is how did you find each other as intergenerational partners?
Yeah, so we initially I started with Rain over there, and so we're students at the University of Denver, and so we've been at this, like I said, for about a year and a half. We had this initial concept and idea. Rain had this initial concept and idea that was a lot bigger than kind of we had initially even thought. And so we went in and we're like, oh, we'll be able to do it, get some tech people, and just put it to market and go. But that was not right. We went and tried to get a tech team. We tried to build the team up. We lost people. We did this and that. We kept going. Eventually, we got the tech people in place. We got this, charity selection process and everything. But the main thing we really lacked was, that intergenerational sort of ability to understand the business world from the perspective of having actually gone through it. We have a bunch of stuff we think we know and find out a lot of times it's not always how it is. And so Rain, kind of going in our initial investment round and all that, had done some pitching, and this was still very early stages. Like I said, big idea. We want to take this, worldwide, fully scalable and everything. So we do need some backing, and that's where JC sort of came in early days. And
all right. So first of all, like when you're my age, pretty much any high-tech entrepreneur that you get involved with, it's going to be an intergen relationship. It's pretty much a given. When I went ahead and decided to invest in Pocket Change, it was on the strength of presenting the ideas, on the strength of a pitch that Rain here gave, and I think that probably what I would say I did not expect was to be as involved as I was, and that would be the area where the intergen thing kind of took a twist. Obviously, investors frequently will come in with more experience, more money, more pocketbook. I mean, that's kind of a given. That's not really intergen new. What is new is the concept of actually trying to get some stuff done together to try to learn from each other, and that part is where I would say that it has been a very pleasant surprise for me.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I mean, through, for example, just a very concrete example would be through closing the investment, there was about 2 months of legal paperwork that we had to do, and this kind of like massive process that we had to undergo to really get the company to be a real company and not just an idea and an LLC. And so working really closely with JC and all of us kind of coming together and putting our heads together constantly, there was so much knowledge that got swapped and so many things that we were constantly learning from each other and so many perspectives that were being brought to the table because we had those different life experiences in the room that I think would totally have been missed if it was just kind of an echo chamber of, okay, we're all the same age, we're all similar backgrounds. So JC brought a ton of that to the table. And then ultimately, right, like our business, our ultimate end goal is we want to empower everyone to take action. And everybody has different perspectives on how they want that to happen. Everybody, different methods of how they want to see that executed. And so having a more intergenerational team, our lead developer is a Gen Xer, and so having an intergenerational team like that really allows us to bring those perspectives into the room and into the creation process, and not just have it be an echo chamber of the same thing that then gets put out into the world and critiqued. It's kind of baked in from the very beginning.
Thank you. Isn't that fascinating? Everyone has a little different perspective and twist on what it means to be intergenerationally diverse. And with that, what I really want to do is I want to hand the mic, if we could, to Dave. And I'd like you to tell us, when you're out offering leadership development services, sessions, and then coaching as a follow-on, what are you seeing in terms of intergenerational diversity and the sharing of wisdom? I often call that bidirectional mentoring. I kind of like that term. It seems to work for me. But what are you seeing?
It's a great question because I think one of the fundamental differences in business today is that there's a real need for us to sometimes just put down the differences, put down the tags, put down the names, the titles, and actually, as you were just describing, look at a situation in its actual light without all of that other stuff we've got to contend with. Now, in a lot of these situations, we go through a very specific process. We have a product called the RLC Success Framework, which is a business strategy in a box, but I want to zone right into two elements. Now, I often get asked around the world, how do you do culture? America talks about culture a lot. What I find is you don't make a lot of sense. The American interpretation of culture, hey, it kind of feels good here, right? That doesn't help intergenerational leadership, right? So we've learned through experience and through, let me be straight, a lot of failing together with clients, right? That you have to take culture into three areas that help us all work together better, right? But there's a golden rule I'm going to share with you in a minute that is a game changer for intergenerational working together. And we take culture down to, first of all, clear definition. Now, number one, everybody in the firm is involved in that, right? So it's no longer a CEO choice. It's no longer a brand choice. Hey, our brand is like that. We can't do that. It's still, as you heard earlier brilliantly, a values-led choice, right? Now, once you've done that and you've defined it, we can then ask the whole intergenerational team to make it the distinction that they want it to be. And then it loops back to brand suddenly, right? And then once you've done that, everybody in the room can use culture as a decision-making process to be able to assess both their own impact, whatever age they are, and also how effective they're being. Now, as part of the framework, though, why that then joins up is this framework process, which is a complete 7-year business jigsaw on a page, right? Eliminates half the noise you probably face with the people that don't listen in VC firms because they've got a lot of anxiety sometimes, haven't they, right? But what it does, it takes away one of the myths of communication. What I see the different generations being able to do is navigate better. No longer am I going, hey, what's this plan for? Because I don't know. They've built it together. And suddenly they're able to go, well, I now know what I can do to make a difference here. And they go off and start solving their own problems. And when the teams get back together, you start to see a completely dynamic business. And that's what I'm seeing in these multi-generational businesses. And some of them, by the way, which is really fascinating, are families, right? Which is a whole different dynamic. And it's working with those too. Does that help?
That is awesome. And it's just so fun to try to listen very carefully so I don't miss a word. I get a little distracted by your kneecaps, but other than that, I want to thank David for flying here. He got in last night. He's been participating since he got here, and he's made it a very enjoyable event, and I appreciate that. It's been a long trip.
Pleasure.
And he gives us a global perspective on this. And I know our co-founder, Jim, has been getting a lot of interest globally. So this is not a unique situation. The EU is actively looking at this. We're going to see more and more global conversation around intergenerational partnership. And who's to say that when you are matched through 4GenNow with your intergenerational partner, that you might not find somebody global that would not be here in the U.S. So I think that's another thing we've seen today with oneclick.chat. I mean, we don't have to be in the same room. One of the things I want to ask about, and I'd like to have each of you, I might have you hand this to Lou. And Lou, you've told us that a little bit about your business, but you have multiple generations, right? What are the challenges and that you have faced working across these multiple generations in a startup?
So for me personally, I think it was understanding the importance of process to help erase generational biases within your teams. So I think we're all self-conscious. You know, you're aware that you are dealing with people who are coming at technology from a different perspective. They come with idea creation through different approaches than what we traditionally did in traditional research and development roles. And so that process challenge, and for us, it's pretty simple. It's to create equality across an organization. So all people, so the CEO, the CFO, the Cs in an organization need to cast aside any concept of hierarchy. All ideas have merit. All challenges will get contributions from everybody in the organization. And so creating a forum where everyone feels empowered to contribute, but to also say, I am trying to fix a problem and I am up against a wall. I cannot get over it. And it is amazing to me when you throw open those questions to an entire team, people who may not have the technology perspective, but have the answer sitting right in front of them and throw it out And we have cleared some amazing hurdles just through that elimination of the concept of intergenerational barrier.
I think it's wonderful because we talk a lot about diversity and inclusiveness. When I moved from corporate America into a nonprofit, we did a lot of work on inclusiveness and diversity. And one of the things that didn't really occur to me at that time, I knew it was about thought leadership from everybody in the room, but I wasn't really thinking across generations at the time. When I was 40, I was the CFO of a public company, and I look back on that, and I don't think I was a very wise CFO. I want to go back to what Chip Conley said about what he learned as he moved through his career and he became a wise elder, right? And so what I'd like to do, John, is if I could come to you, you may be the wise elder in this triad here. If you could, yes, okay. If you
well, I'm the elder, I'll give you that much.
If you could tell us how you bring wisdom to the team and how then maybe the two of you can weigh in and how you receive it.
You know, I would probably challenge the concept that wisdom is a one-way street. I think that in any partnership, and that would include really diversity of any kind, and including intergen diversity, you need to have a connection that runs beyond the business. You have to actually want to learn from your partners. You have to actually value learning from your partners, maybe even enjoy hanging out with your partners. These are all things that are valuable in business in general, but I think take on a larger import when you have an intergen situation because you have a lot of natural differences, right? You have different times you wake up, different schedules, different ways that you schedule business because you've been doing it for 30 years instead of 3. It's like these things are, there's no harm, no foul in any way that things are done. It's just that they're different. And so really, I don't know that you can go and say, oh, I am this fountain of wisdom that is delivering down. I think more of what I see is that it's a sharing in that there's a reason that it's intergen. If it were just me, it would have the problems of a company started by just people my age. I don't really think that I have anything special that my co-founders don't have to offer as well. The key is working back and forth and trying to fill in the gap so that between all of you, you're kind of missing nothing.
Thank you. Do either of you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with everything. I think just like in any type of diversity, intergenerational being a very key one, it really comes down to empathy. I think JC does it probably better than I do, but it comes down to, can you understand where the other person is coming from and what their perspective is, and like what their kind of obstacles or things, like where are you dropping the ball, and think about it from their perspective. So I do it a lot where, you know, for example, I'm pretty terrible at email. JC's great at email. So he'll shoot me an email and I won't respond for 2 days and then he'll get mad at me. Understandable, very understandable. But from his perspective, right, it's all of a sudden I'm disappearing off of the face of the earth and we're not able to have these discussions. And now we've kind of corrected it, and you know, we have very consistent calls and we catch up with each other and are very transparent with each other. But I think it all kind of boils down to empathy, and I agree. I think it's very much a two-way street. I think that, you know, we have a lot to offer. I think JC has a lot to offer, and I think we talk a lot about it in kind of like as a Kevlar net. So one person brings a lot of really strong perspective, and then the other person brings it the other way. And then when you combine those two, nothing's going to get through. Not a bullet, you know, nothing. So if you have that Kevlar net and you try and build them with as many different people across as many different, you know, types of diversity as possible, thought diversity, you know, all of that, I think it's going to work out.
Fantastic. Did you want to add anything?
I guess just a quick thing within kind of that empathy thing. Also, one of the key challenges is even just the different lifestyles we live, or sort of, you know, sometimes JC kind of hangs out with us, but no. But no, it's sort of the even within that, it's, you know, maybe it's one night we're done, you know, we're working all day, okay, we're going to do our own things, and all of a sudden we get an email for some sort of partnership or some sort of opportunity, and it's, you know, we're kind of like, oh, what do we do? And JC may be in that spot of, oh, you know, I've got my anniversary dinner tonight, I can't do this thing. Like, Christian, you take it. I'm like, well, I've got a science project due in an hour. So it's like, Rain's like, oh, well, the girl I like texts me back. So it's, you know, I don't know. But it comes down to, there's all sorts of different, even just lifestyle needs where, you know, we kind of go in a little bit blind within the reality of like the financials of it and all that sort of stuff, where it's, you know, we don't have college, or we do have college debt to pay, I guess, but we don't have, we're not paying for our kids yet and all that sort of stuff, where JC kind of has the reality of, okay, well, if we're going to bring this here, we need to have, a sustainable revenue model and all this, but we're kind of going in like, no, we're just going to change the world and the money will come eventually. So it's kind of the balance between figuring out different perspectives and being able to understand that what you're saying is valid, but there's also another perspective to it, I guess.
Thank you. And if you could hand that mic right to Dave, I'd like to ask you a question about some of your clients where you're the CEO, the leader that you're working with in the organization is of a younger generation versus the clients where the leader is maybe a boomer like myself. Is there anything that you can share that you would share with those clients about being a successful leader that crosses the intergenerational bounds and also things that don't seem to stick across those bounds?
Well, I'd probably answer from a personal perspective. So I'm sure you've all heard this before, but I'm going to reaffirm it, that successful people have a coach. I have a coach. I have a coach I've been working with for somewhat 13, 14 years. So much so in my book, I particularly give him credit as the two people in my life that have made the biggest difference. One of them is my wife, Debbie, who's not here. She is the magic 5% that makes me be able to optimize my 100%. And without her, I got to tell you, I'm 95% the guy. But Glenn, what he's great at, Glenn McCoy, who's my creative director, I actually met him in a coaching team. But I remember once, let me tell you about this. I'm sat in Starbucks, my favorite remote office in any city of the world. And I'm in Starbucks, and we're having a coaching session. So rather than talk about a client, I'll talk about my personal experience of it. And I'm talking to Glenn, and I say to Glenn, look, do you know when I leave you after a coaching session, what are the things you think to yourself about me that maybe you haven't taken the time to say? Surprisingly, he had an answer because he's a baby boomer. He was rather polite, and he would never say. He said, sometimes, Dave, I just wish you'd give yourself a good shaking down because you don't quite realize the gifts and the moments that are ahead of you. So I listened to him, as you'd expect. Then I gave him some feedback. Not like that. And I have an irritating trait as a human that when I get stretch feedback, I can apply it the same moment I learn it. It's annoying. I can do it straight away because I make the person tell me exactly what they meant. And when we'd finished, I then asked him a question. I'd like you to do one thing for me. And I'm going to answer then the question as a generalized rule. Do this. When you see me going down cul-de-sacs, when you see me coming up with an idea you had, right? And you think, Dave, what are you doing, right? I value something that I heard about yesterday wonderfully from a great brand over there about solving our home repairs, right? Bid my vid. I value time. I don't want to waste time learning things because you're applying a learning process, right? If you know I'm about to screw up, I said to Glenn, you should tell me. Because if you can see it and I can't, that's why you're my coach. And what I find in businesses today, between the generational gaps, particularly the two you mentioned, is the older generation sometimes are too respectful to the younger CEOs coming through. And they're not direct enough. And they can, because of all the coaching that I represent, and I disagree with most of it, right? Because I didn't come from a learning background. I fell into the industry 15 years ago when we started RLC. I don't agree with this, look inside yourself for the answer in the middle of an experience when you're traumatized, full of anxiety, and you're screwing the thing up, right? I want to know, absolutely want to know, what it is you can see that I can't see because I value time. And I find that the younger CEOs of today, right, whatever age, feel similar. And I don't think they're really as precious as what people actually think. And, directive coaching is not the answer to everything. But I know with some of my clients who run businesses, I just cut straight in and say, do you know what you're about to do? And there are exceptions as well, Robin. I was working with a young CEO in a 25,000 company turnaround, and we were in a war meeting, right? A war meeting. And I have the interference that says, why am I in the meeting? And then suddenly, you step up to the plate and you influence. And then this genius CEO went against all the advice you can get in the world with a single idea. And he was right. And that company saw off in the British marketplace, it saw off Best Buy. That's how right he was. But if he'd followed the rules, the normal rules, they'd have closed and 25,000 families would have lost their jobs. So sometimes you've got to be ready to let that young CEO just take the risk because they can see things you can't see. But in the long and short of it is point out the gaps. Don't wait for them to learn it because we all value time.
Oh, that is a great segue since we are almost out of time, and I value hearing from the audience. I want to make sure that we give it just a few minutes for maybe 3 or 4 questions. We'll see how long-winded we are up here. When we get the answers, we'll determine it. But if you have a question, you could raise your hand for one of our panelists. Got some right here, and then one in the back. Martin, we'll come back in a minute.
So this question is for Lou and for, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get your name. Ray. Rain, got it. I'm working with a Ren, so I get it. R-E-N-N. Anyway, cool. So Lou and Rain. Lou, you had said something about the CEO basically getting off their high chair and getting down into the muck and taking feedback. And that rang with me. What I wanted to get your feedback on was how does that go beyond plain lip service? How does that get to authentic feedback from authentic intergenerational feedback? And I'd like to hear your thoughts on it, and then to go to Rain and others and say, what has actually worked when you feel like someone is listening to you, your intergenerational partner is listening to you?
Yeah, so I think the short answer is it's based on actions. So, it's one thing to, first of all, it's one of the most critical things for all communication, whether it's C-level communications out to an organization or vice versa, is the ability for people to listen to each other. So if you can just, in all sincerity, not think that you know an outcome or an answer and sincerely take the time to hear not just the question, but the nuance to that question, and then translate that to action that says, I heard you, that it's important that I listen and hear those things, and that it translates. If you're just doing it as an exercise to make people feel good, it's a waste of time. If you are doing it because you sincerely want to move teams forward, and you are willing to take action based upon what you hear, people forget that you're a CEO. They view you as just another member of a team. And they will absolutely throw themselves down to do whatever it takes to move that organization forward. And I see that in all of our companies, that when people sincerely respect the importance of ideas and communication and translate that to action, that the organization at large wins every time.
Thanks, Lou. And I will say, while this is getting passed down, I worked with Lou. We were on the same team 17, 18, 20 years ago, and that's a man of action. He is not giving it lip service. He would translate what needed to get done into action, and if one of his teammates didn't get to it, he'd be in your face. So he's walking his talk still.
Yeah, so what I would say is I think there's a difference between listening and hearing. So I believe you're talking about like hearing, because anybody can listen and then in one ear out the other. And so for me, the feedback piece is always a little bit tricky, because it's like, especially as a young CEO or as a young co-founder trying to do something, where we're pushing a lot of boundaries and, doing that kind of thing, a lot of people are going to tell you that you're wrong all the time. And so the feedback piece is tricky because you let some in, and then you have to ignore a lot of it. But I think where it comes, like the piece that works is we spend a lot of time making sure that we're on the same page about everything and really trusting each other. And anytime any of that gets kind of like out of alignment or out of whack, we attack it and figure out what's wrong and fix it and make sure we're on the same track. And so when JC brings something up to me, I know it's genuine. I know he has my best intent, at the very forefront. And I'm going to be really willing to hear it and listen to it. And then he does a really, really good job of following up with that, afterwards and making sure that, it's not happening again or that kind of thing. So I think it's you have to first kind of build a rapport, which sounds, it's kind of the same ideas, right? Like you have to be really close with the person and make sure that, the feedback is really genuine and not surface level. They're very much on the same page as you are. And then once that happens, it's kind of the floodgates are open, and anything that JC says, I trust, and I think it's great feedback and totally take it to heart.
But I would add to that, just going in the other direction, that there's also work that needs to be done by somebody who's providing the feedback. That would be me, and that is in knowing what to say, when to say it, not to say too much, because nobody likes to just be deluged with information. And after a while, when you work with somebody, you got to get a bead for, okay, this is the kind of thing they might want to hear, and this is the kind of thing they might not want to hear. I'm a lot better with that than I was, 3 months ago or whatnot, or 6 months ago, and it's just something that you have to work at, and it would be the same as in any other partnership, and the Intergen part makes it something that, on one hand, it's more work, and on the other hand, it's actually more fun once you actually break through and get it done.
Awesome. I think Martin was next, and then we'll move over here, and that will be all the time we have for questions. If my panelists could limit to about 30 seconds answering, we can get 2 in.
All right, I have a 6-part question. Actually, JC, I missed your background, so if you could do a quick 15-second blurb on that. And then Rain, and both of you actually, you're in college, you're founding a business, you're entrepreneurs, you're very well spoken. I'd be curious, because trust me, when I was in college and your age, just up the road at CSU, I was not sitting on panels like this, unless that panel was in front of a bar. But other than that, I'd be curious about what was your inspiration? Who did you read as a young individual to determine, okay, I want to start doing this? And then Lou, to your point, are these some of the attributes when you're invested in companies that you kind of look at the granular DNA of the company to see their passion, their motivation, and then talk a little bit about that?
That really is a 6-part question. 15 seconds, huh? All right, I'm a technology investor. I live in Southwest Montana, and I enjoy traveling around and getting involved in small companies, and every once in a while I feel like I've struck gold, and I feel like I've struck gold with these fellas, and we have a great time.
And then on the kind of going through college while also pursuing this, I think that there is basically the drive of, when I'm doing schoolwork, it feels very transactional. I go in, I have to go to class, I get a check mark that I'm there, and then there's an assignment I complete, turn in, all that. But I don't function like that at all. I basically, the entire, if it was any other company, I would have given up months and months ago. But the Pocket Change sort of mission and the purpose behind it is so driven in my core that I can't even, I don't know what else I'd want to be doing with my free time. And beyond that, it almost feels like it's a necessity to kind of go for something like this, given the opportunity presented. So I think that's what drives me in that.
Yeah, and then I'm a big fan of Richard Branson and Elon Musk. Read a lot of them.
Mine's really simple. We look for people who love what they do. And so if you love what you do, it shines through, and that's probably the single most important factor relative to us making a decision to support an organization is it filled with people who love what they do. By the way, it's also our number one coaching is that if you don't love what you do, stop and go find something that you do love, because that is a definer of success.
Thank you. And we have time for just one more quick question.
It's a quick question. So over the years, I've seen a number of CEOs and entrepreneurs selling their business, CEOs retiring, who want to offer their mentor skills to startups, but not invest. I think it's easier if you invest to be engaged in a company. But if you don't invest in it, how do we drive demand with the younger generation to seek out elders?
I would just say advisory is any company who's not leveraging non-traditional advisory boards as a part of acquiring those types of knowledge bases is missing a huge opportunity.
I would entirely agree. And I think that I'd like to encourage you. We have a part solution. There's a few people in the room who've launched the Mastery Network to bring together people like this under a movement heading alongside 4GenNow. And I think it's a matter of time before America calls on that resource because companies need the counsel. But I agree, non-advisory board members, if you've just got to knock the door, and I'm sure there's companies that will ask, but you've also got to make the call. If you're selling, you've got to make the call. If you want to help a company, you've got to make the call.
Great. And I'm going to cut it off there if I can for just a moment. Would you hold that for me just a minute? I'm getting off the stage with our panelists. I'm going to allow you all to take your leave. I've got one more thing to add, but let's give them a huge round of applause, right? Fantastic. It is so fun to moderate a panel like this. I feel like it's just an opportunity you can't pass up. And thank you so much, John. What I would like to speak with you about for just a moment before Anastasia comes back up is I hope you all have really enjoyed this. As an advisory board member, this year we got our 501c3. And as I told you, I have had such an amazing time learning and growing and working with Jim. And the value of what he's created is absolutely enormous. We are now a nonprofit. But Jim, in the goodness of his heart, said we're not putting envelopes on the table today. I'd like to challenge every one of you, if you had a great time today, and if you believe in this kind of diversity and this kind of language and conversation that takes us to the next step and allows us all to be more successful, would you please get on our website and make a donation to our nonprofit this year? We would love to do it. We are brand new. This is the first time we've done an ask, and since I was in nonprofit, I told Jim I'd do it. And I'm going to try to advise him to do it more often because I think we get a lot of value out of this, and I know we try to keep it very, very affordable for you to come. So please, please help us by giving of your time, talent, and treasure, and help us take this to the next level. We'd like to have more summits in multiple cities, and we're finishing our app to make matching an online event. So there's a lot going on for us. So we'd love to have you guys step up. Thank you so much in advance for that. Thank you.